Namaste Gurukulians. Hope all of you are healthy, fit and fine. And students, in my previous video, in part 1 and 2, we have started chapter number 2 of this book, Snapshot. Clear? So we are going to start the further part number 3. And please carry this book in your hand along with some pen or pencil in order to underline some difficult words. The story is The Address. By Marga, Minco. In first video, I have given the description of the writer Marga Minco. She was a lady from Dutch, Holland. She recently has completed her 100 years old age. The beautiful depiction, the beautiful contribution she has given in the entire English literature and having eminent and prominent place in the history of entire English literature. Clear? So the Address is the story of a mother and a daughter who used to live in a village just nearby to the border. When the war got started in Holland, maximum people, they started running by leaving their places, same as it is. And the mother of the narrator, Mrs. S, she was one of them. But few of them, they had not left the place and they stayed, they remained back. Okay. So Mrs. S, before leaving the place, she had given her belongings. Belongings, I mean to say that the goods using at home, under the observation of a cunning lady. She was the neighbor of Mrs. S, Mrs. Darling, right? So when she had given all the belongings and and she kept a promise, Mrs. Darling kept a promise to Mrs. Sue that she would return back all the things when she came back after ceasefire. So when the war was ceased, nothing happened. She didn't come back, and after 10 to 12 years old, she was still suffering from illness and she was just about to die. And immediately just before her death, she called the narrator and she started requesting her to go to the address, particularly 46 Markney Street, where Mrs. Darling used to live, and fetch all the belongings back from her. Okay. At first, the narrator, she felt hesitation, but on the insist of her mother, when she had died, okay, she wanted to fulfill the last desire of her mother, and finally, therefore, she got ready and she paid a visit on the same address, 46 Markney Street, right? This was the address, 46 Markney Street. Okay, she paid a visit to this address. When she knocked the door, the old fluffy lady, she came outside. She was wearing the cardigan of the narrator's mother. At first, she refused to recognize the narrator from where she had come from. And moreover, when the narrator, she defined the name of her mother that she was the daughter of Mrs. S, even then she didn't recognize the narrator and her mother. And she had accepted one thing, that thousands of people, they had left their places when the war got started in the hope to get a safe place. She might be one of them, but she didn't recognize her mother. Clear? When the narrator started realizing that she was coming just before and wrong address, but suddenly when the door was opened with a chink and she had seen Mrs. Darling was wearing the same cardigan which belonged to her mother, late mother, right? Immediately she came to know that lady, she was befooling her, and Mrs. Darling, she didn't want to have an interaction, and she hid her cardigan behind the door and closed the door by scolding, shouting, okay, and threw out the window, and she started scolding the narrator when she was reading the nameplate. Clear? All the things. It was just like an insult for the narrator, and she had decided to leave the place immediately. And when she was going back to station, and what kind of things were going on, and she was remembering the old past memories that she used to live in these streets. Okay, she was coming in the bazaars. Okay, and she used to purchase she used to do so many shoppings with her mother. etc., etc. Clear? While going to the station, and she was recalling Mrs. Darling that I do remember that she used to come to my mother, okay, in order to fetch the belongings. Clear? She was known to my mother, but I had simply a glance of her. That's why I couldn't recognize her face properly. Now I have realized that she is a cunning lady. She is a shrewd lady who doesn't want to return my belongings back to me. Right? So students, what happened after that? Let's start. So open page number 11. Okay, and the third last paragraph. Every time she leaves here, she takes something home with her, said my mother. Means my mother, she had told me when I was a small kid and I used to reside here at my house. She told me that every time she leaves her, she talks something home with her. Means while moving from one place to another, along with Mrs. Darling, in the company of Mrs. Darling, her neighbor, that she used to drop her at her home. While talking, she took all the table silver in one go. Whenever she used to come to my home, once when I had requested, means when the narrator's mother, she had requested Mrs. Darling to fetch all the belongings under her observation, she started paying a visit to my home, right? And what happened over there? She at a one time, means started bringing all the things, table silver spoon, okay, sometime she had collected the spoons, card, forks, knives made of silver, okay, and she brought it at her home. Clear? And again on the next visit she came back, the antique plates means that is some special kind of plates made on the basis of just like old ancient tradition, and these are very costly. Clear? She used to collect the antique plates, very costly plates. Those were hanging on the wall in the drawer, in the cupboards. She collected all of them and she had taken. Okay, crockery she was collecting, spoons she was collecting, cards she was collecting, all the things one by one she was fetching at her home. She had trouble lugging those large vases. The large vases were there at my home. Vases means what we call fuldan in Hindi translation, right? Vases were there. Even then she had taken the large vases at her home, although she was facing some problem in order to bring at her home, but she had taken, and I'm worried. She got a crick in her back from the crockery. I was worried when the huge the burden she was carrying on her body. I thought, means the narrator, she started feeling worry regarding Mrs. Darling. How would she get all the things on her back? She would get a crick on her back, means that she would be having some injury, initial injury, inside injury, the hidden injury. My mother shook her head pityingly, means my mother, she started moving her head pityingly, means oh my God, whenever suppose if you are looking the pitiable condition of someone, you are going to make some special kind of gestures on your face. Those kind of gestures were being elaborated by the mother of the narrator, and I would have never dared ask her, means I would have never dared ask her, means that how would she bring it, but simply she was showing the expressions on her face. My mother, she suggested it to me herself, means she had suggested it all the things herself. She even insisted, she wanted to save all my nice things. If we have to leave here, we shall lose everything. She says that she wanted to collect all the things. It doesn't matter that she was not fond of the things. It was a compulsion of my mother, because war got started. WOAR, war got started over there, and she wanted to go to a safe place. That's why she had allowed Mrs. Darling to fetch all the belongings. Then that means suppose if we going to leave over here, definitely we are going to lose the things. Have you agreed with her that she should keep everything? I asked. At that time, I asked my mother, oh my dear mother, can you elaborate one thing? That means, have you taken the surety by that cunning lady, Mrs. Darling, that she would be able to keep all the things safe at her home? As if that's necessary, my mother cried. Yes, my dear, this is necessary. It would simply be an insult to talk like that. Suppose if I'm going to ask this thing, it would be simply an insult. Definitely she is my neighbor, she is well known to me. She would look after my belongings, no problem is there. But suppose if I'm going to ask something to her, she would feel insult, and I don't want to make her insult, that's all. And think about the risk she is running, and think about the risk whatever she is going to live over here and she is not going. Each time she goes out of the door with a full suitcase or bag, every time she is coming at my home, and huge burden she is carrying on her shoulder. Think, my dear, she is doing huge labor like laborers. No need to call any labor. She herself is doing physical activity. Think about her. She is a laborious lady. Don't worry. She will look after her about her belonging in a good way. My mother seemed to notice that I was not entirely convinced. My mother, she started looking at my facial expression. That means I was not convinced. I was not agreed. I could not be agreed completely to my mother. No, mother, I think so. I have a suspect on this lady. She looked at me reprovingly. Reprovingly means that if you are chiding someone, reprovingly, it means chiding or scolding. Means in Hindi translation, dantna, chiding, scolding, reprovingly. My mother started looking towards me. She started staring towards me reprovingly. She started chiding me, scolding me. Shut up, in this way. And after that we spoke no more about it, and I got quiet. I kept my mouth shut. I didn't speak anything about it. Meanwhile, I had arrived at the station. I was thinking all these past memories. Means narrator was thinking all these memories when she was going back to station from the house of Mrs. Darling. Finally the station arrived. Means she arrived at station without having paid much attention to the things on the way. Means on the way she didn't pay much attention towards the buildings, bazaar and other things. She was lost in the memories. I was walking in familiar places again for the first time since the war, but I didn't want to go further than was necessary. I was walking in familiar places. Familiar places means the places which I know. Okay, the places which are in my known. Clear? I know this place, these places, right? So these places are known to me. I'm much familiar with these places. I'm walking the first time after war. War got seized many years before, but after war, when the war had finished, war had stopped, war had been seized. After that, first time I'm walking in the street of these places, right? I didn't want to upset myself with the sight of streets and houses full of memories from a precious time. Now the narrator says that she didn't want to make herself embarrassed. She didn't want to make herself sad. She didn't want to make herself unpleasant by looking towards the street deeply, and started thinking about the houses where she had spent her childhood days. Okay, by having a memory of the precious time. That was a precious time when I used to reside over here. I don't want to spoil my mind. Otherwise, I will be emotional. I will be full of sentiments which I don't want to. There is my daughter, said my mother. In the train back, I saw Mrs. Darling in front of me again, as I had the first time I met her. In the train, when I was going back, okay, she was uploaded into the train, and while sitting in the train, and she started looking, Mrs. Darling, she was standing just before her eyes. In front of me again, as I had the first time I met her. Means it seemed that means the first time I had seen Mrs. Darling. It was the morning after the day my mother had told me about her. Means just one day before. Okay, the day before yesterday, my mother, she had told me. It was just like that. I'm finding Mrs. Darling over here in front of my eyes. I had got up late, and coming downstairs, I saw my mother about to see someone out. It was just like that. She again got lost in the past memory that she was coming downwards. Okay, and she got late. She got up late in the early morning and coming downstairs. Okay. The narrator, she had seen her mother about to see someone out, that her mother was talking to some lady outside, a woman with a broad back, ek chode kandho wali aurat, a woman with a broad back, and that was Mrs. Darling. Means the picture of the past memory, it was revolving around his eyes in this way, right? There is my daughter, said my mother. My mother made my introduction to that lady. She beckoned to me. Beckon means making gesture. Beckoned. Beckon means making some gestures. How? Clear? So for example, if you are greeting someone, good morning sir, the person will be like, good morning, and this way, right? She beckoned to me. She showed her expression, gestures to me. The woman nodded. Nod means moving head in this way, and picked up the suitcase under the coat rack. There was a coat rack, and she kept the suitcase in her hand and just started moving. She wore a brown coat and shapeless hat. A brown long coat she was wearing, and a hat which she was wearing, it was shapeless. Okay, it didn't suit to her personality, but she was wearing it. Then, does she live far away? I asked. Mama, does she live far away from our house? Tell me. Seeing the difficulty she had going out of the house with a heavy case, means how painstakingly she is bringing the belongings from our house, my mama. See. Then, no beta, in Markney Street, the street just nearby to our house, Markney Street is there, and she is living over there in Markney Street, right? And number 46. 46, the house number in Markney Street. Remember that. Don't forget this address where she resides. I had remembered it for a long lasting period. I did remember that address. But I had waited for a long time to go to there. Means I kept waiting to pay a visit to this address after a long gap. Because my mother, she didn't come back over here. Initially, after the liberation, when the freedom was given to my country after liberation, I was absolutely not interested in all that stored stuff. Stuff means belongings. Stored means collected. I was not much interested in order to collect the material, the belongings which Mrs. Darling kept. Okay. And naturally, I was also rather afraid of it. And moreover, naturally, the fear was in my mind. What would I do of that belonging? And afraid of being confronted. Confronting means challenge, tackling. Confronted means to tackle or just encountering the things. Means you are going to interact the thing, you are going to tackle the things. Okay, she was saying, oh, I was afraid of being confronted the things that had belonged to a connection that no longer existed. Means the belongings, the goods, whatever Mrs. Darling was having, those belonged to my mother, but could not have an existence with me for a long lasting period. I had no connectivity to the belongings, to the goods, whatever Mrs. Darling was having, right? At that time, which were hidden away in cupboards and boxes. The belongings like crockeries, spoons, silver spoons, carts, okay, tablecloth and other things, everything had been stored into the house of Mrs. Darling. Some of them, they were stored in the cupboards. Some of them, they were stored in boxes, clear, and waiting in vain until they were put back in the places again. And it seemed, aisa lagta tha, it seemed that the belongings kept waiting for their places to be changed at an appropriate places, which had endured all those years because they were things. Means this remained for a long lasting period because these were the things. Nobody was going to change them. I was the only person. After a long period, I could be able to come back once again in order to change the belongings places, right? But whether I would be succeeded or not, that was a tricky thing for me, right? But gradually everything became more and more normal again. Bread was going to be a lighter color. There was a bed you could sleep in unthreatened. A room with a view. You were more used at a glancing at each day. Means gradually everything was going to become normal. The narrator was thinking about it. Bread was going to be a lighter color, means the bread, it's a proverb, means the things were going to be very smooth, very easy. There was a bed you could sleep in unthreatened, means this also proverb, there would be a bed where you can have a sound sleep, no one can distract you, in the same manner that nobody would be able to distract you. Okay, so a room with a view that you were more used glancing at each day, means the room about its view that you had been expecting to have a glance each day, and that would be given to you. And one day I noticed I was curious about all that possession. One day, after long gap, suddenly it came to my mind. It means it came to the mind of the narrator, and she started having the possession on the belongings which belonged to her mother, right? That must still be at the address, means she was expecting these belongings must be at 46 Markney Street on the same address. I must grab them back. I wanted to see them, touch and remember. I simply wanted to touch the belongings. I simply wanted to see them. I simply wanted to recall my past memories that my mother, happily she had purchased all those belongings, right? After my first visit in vain to Mrs. Darling's house, I decided to try a second one. So after having a long discussion to my views, means that she was overthinking about this matter. Finally, she had decided herself in order to have another look towards the belongings. Whether Mrs. Darling, she had insulted me, no problem. But once again, I would go back to there. I would tackle Mrs. Darling. I would talk to her. And once I must see my belongings back. How difficultly my mother, she had got their possession. Right? Now a girl of about 15, means now again she came out of the station and she went back. Okay. So now again she came before this address 46 Markney Street and she rang the bell. Now this time a girl of 15 years old, 15 saal ki ladki, 15 years old, she opened the door, right? And she was the daughter of Mrs. Darling. Now a girl of 15 opened the door to me. I asked her if her mother was at home. I simply recognized she must be the daughter of Mrs. Darling. I asked about her mother. Excuse me, can I have a meet with your mother? Can I meet your mother? Could you please call her? No, she said. No, madam. My mother is doing an errand, means my mother is busy in some work. No matter, means my mother, she has an urgent work and that's why she had been to the market for an urgent work and she would be coming after some time. Madam, she is not at home. No matter, no problem, no worries. I said, I'll wait for her. I will wait for your mother. I followed the girl along the passage and then the girl, she simply called me inside. In the passage means Galiara. Into the passage, I stayed forward, started moving further. An old-fashioned iron Hanukkah. Hanukkah actually, it's a feast of light, a Hebrew festival in December. Especially nearby Christmas, it's like a candlestick wherever we can install some candles in order to make a celebration clear. Especially at a dinner time, it's made of iron. Okay, sometimes it's made of silver, but that was made of iron at Mrs. Darling's house. So she had seen old-fashioned. It was looking old-fashioned, not looking very much appealing. The Hanukkah was there. It's a candle hung next to a mirror. Means suppose if here is a mirror and next to mirror it was hanging over there, right? We never used it because it was much more cumbersome than a single candlestick. Means it was just like a awkward. It was not looking good, appealing to us. And even that belonged to my mother. That was one of the belongings of my mother. And I started looking one by one, so many things, clear? So today itself, I think so it's sufficient for students. And what were things she had encountered when she was sitting over there? Okay, what happened after that? Would she able to meet once again Mrs. Darling or not? All these things we'll discuss in the next part. Until then, I think so that you might have got all the things. So please, it's my humble request to each and everyone. Please, students, send your queries in the WhatsApp number in which you have been already added. Okay, I might be taking your some doubt session. Suppose if you do face. Okay, till then, take care. Have a nice day. Namaskar.